Whenever you're ready and comfortable, you can begin.
135. That was the number of combined Union and Confederate casualties at the Battle of Natural Bridge, taking place in Leon and Wakulla counties on March 3rd through 7th, 1865. The Battle of Natural Bridge was the most influential battle of the Civil War that occurred in Florida, as the Confederate victory repelled the Union advance and saved Tallahassee as the only Confederate capital east of the Mississippi River not to fall into Union hands. The battle was extremely important for Floridians, even though in the scheme of things it was a small battle throughout the Civil War. The Battle of Natural Bridge is extremely important to us as it occurred in Leon and Wakulla counties, and due to the fact that 200 cadets from the West Florida Seminary, now Florida State University, saved the capital city of Tallahassee. I was born and raised in North Florida, and most of my family still lives here. I'm a senior history major at FSU and have conducted much of my coursework in the Civil War. I have also visited many Civil War battlefields and conducted a great amount of research on the topic. Today, I will provide a brief history or overview of the battle, detail the FSU cadets' involvement, and explain the impact on the local population. First off, I will summarize the battle, providing descriptions of the principal commanders and the outcome of the conflict. The St. Mark's Campaign, including the Battle of Natural Bridge, was a joint Union Army and Navy operation commanded by General John Newton and Admiral Cornelius Stribling, respectively. Goals of the campaign included the capture of Tallahassee and a northward thrust into Georgia. Other goals of the campaign included the destruction of the salt works at St. Mark's, which were influential to the Confederacy for the preserving of meat and other foods, and also to use as a bargaining chip for weapons. General William Miller of the Confederate States Army was in command of the armies at the Battle of Natural Bridge. He was also responsible for reorganizing and resupplying the Confederate Army. In his memoirs entitled Battle of Natural Bridge, he remarks, "I found our soldiers barefooted and in sadly tattered clothes." This quote serves to illustrate the disparities between the Union and Confederate armies. The 2nd Florida Union Cavalry was responsible for the capture of the bridges over the Osceola, East, and Ocklawaha River. However, the attacks failed. Due to overwhelming numbers, the Confederates were forced to retreat to the town of Newport, where General Miller arrived promptly with reinforcements, turning the tide of the conflict in favor of the Confederacy. Newton was forced to cross the river at the Natural Bridge, a move easily anticipated by General Miller. Because of General Miller's timely arrival, Newton was forced to retreat to the coast, resulting in a Confederate victory. Secondly, I would like to discuss the involvement of the West Florida Seminary cadets, who played an active and crucial role in fighting. The West Florida Seminary officially changed its name to the Florida Military Institute with the beginning of the Civil War. Principal Duncan Turner was influential in changing the curriculum to include military activities. On March 5th, 1865, 200 FSU cadets between the ages of 12 and 18 were put on full alert. However, only 25 to 60 saw action in the Battle of Natural Bridge, as many were too young for fighting. In his work entitled Far from Fields of Glory, Military Operations in Florida During the Civil War, 1864 to 1865, David Coles presents the eyewitness testimony of Sue Archer, a fellow student of the cadets at the Florida Military Institute. As Archer remembers, the little fellows were full of patriotism and seemed to feel no fear. One little boy, barefooted and wearing the cadet's uniform, stood apart from the others and was crying because Captain Johnson refused to let him go as he was too young. The Florida Military Institute cadets effectively defended Newport and suffered no casualties. General Miller, anticipating the moves of the Union, moved all of his forces to the Natural Bridge, where he placed the Florida Military Institute cadets at the center of the line, again suffering no casualties. The FMI cadets returned to Tallahassee and received a hero's welcome as they were touted as the saviors of the capital city. Lastly, I will discuss the impact of the Battle of Natural Bridge on the communities surrounding Tallahassee, as well as the impact on the overall military situation throughout Florida. The Battle of Natural Bridge's outcome affected the entire state of Florida. General Newton's hopes to destroy Tallahassee and move northward into Georgia were dashed, and the Union forces were forced to return to their bases at Cedar Key and Key West. The Battle of Natural Bridge would represent the last major Civil War action in the state of Florida. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Army of Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. However, despite the surrender, minor skirmishes continued throughout the state of Florida due to a lack of expedient communication. The Confederate surrender caused a great loss of property and land throughout the communities in the South. In Tracy J. Rebel's article, Grandeur and Her Daughters, Florida's Women During the Civil War, Tallahassee native Sarah Ann Fletcher wrote a letter to her son, a former Confederate soldier. She writes, "If we are subjugated, we will lose our land and anything else. Do not tell that you killed a Yankee, for they might want to kill you for it." The overall magnitude of the Confederate victory was overshadowed by the surrender of General Robert E. Lee soon after the conclusion of the Florida campaign. But for the soldiers involved, their sacrifices would never be forgotten. In conclusion, I hope you have enjoyed the Civil War history of Tallahassee and that you have learned something new. By summarizing the history of the battle, identifying the role of the Florida Military Institute cadets, and explaining the impact on the local population, we can understand the significance of the Battle of Natural Bridge. The Battle of Natural Bridge, again, was Florida's most influential battle as it repelled the Union advance and saved Tallahassee as the only capital east of the Mississippi River not to fall to Union forces. The next time you walk across campus, turn off your cell phone and imagine 200 FSU cadets and appreciate their struggle for family, land, and their country.